All right, so I think we can probably go ahead and get things kicked off. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's session featuring Office Depot. My name is Jackie Cooper. I'm on the marketing team at HighSpot and your host for today's session. Just a quick note that we do have some virtual attendees joining us today, and they can only hear audio through the microphone. So during Q&A, we'll be passing the microphone around, and if you have a question, please use the microphone so everyone can hear you. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Cassie Eschkenbach and Ray Espinosa. And we will go ahead and kick things over to them. So thank you so much for joining.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. As you mentioned, I'm Cassie Eschenbach within our sales enablement department at Office Depot, specifically our B2B arm, which we call ODP Business Solutions. And then, Ray, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Ray Espinosa, and I'm actually the admin for HighSpot for Office Depot. I, too, am in the business unit called Office Depot ODP Business Solutions, but managing the platform for the entire organization.
Awesome. All right. So to get started, to help give some context here, I kind of want to understand where you're at in your HighSpot journey. So if we could raise of hands here. If you have had HighSpot implemented for over a year, can you raise your hand? Okay. If you have had HighSpot implemented for less than a year, but you have recently implemented it, raise your hand there. Okay. And then is there anybody who has not yet implemented HighSpot but is considering it in the future or looking at options there? Awesome. Awesome. Okay, that helps us to kind of curtail the conversation, knowing where you're at in your journey. So we're excited to chat with you today. Feel free to raise hands, ask questions at any point, and we're happy to share some of our knowledge with you and chat with you too. So we will go over a few things with you today. One, our story about why are we here, and then a number of specific things that we have found from a governance perspective are incredibly helpful and vital to a strong governance strategy within HighSpot. You can go to the next slide, Ray. So why are we here? Why HighSpot? So to give you a little context, we implemented HighSpot earlier this year. We're on, I think, month 6 or so now. But we had another tool that we had utilized for our content management system, and the perception was negative, very negative. It was one of those things where we were like, hey, this is an uphill battle. So do we climb that uphill battle, or do we consider alternatives and think about what alternatives will have a better solution, not just for content management, but for some other things? So one of the primary reasons we considered HighSpot was looking at the training and coaching functionality as well. So not just content, but having everything baked together in one. So that was a major selling point for us. Additionally, we wanted it to be as intuitive and natural as possible. When you think about tools, they have to really enable your people without you having to lead the horse to water. They've got to know where the water is naturally. So that was another critical thing for us. But really why we're here and speaking to it today is we were able to take something that was very negatively received within our organization and turn it into a positive. The feedback and perception of HighSpot now is incredibly positive, which, this time last year was a very different story with a different tool. And another thing that I wanted to bring up as well is the tool itself is fantastic. Like, we are all major HighSpot fans. But you have to also have the strong infrastructure to support as well. So as somebody who's, considering it, make sure that you are not just expecting the tool to magically do everything for you on its own. You have to have the people. You have to have a solid plan as well for ongoing maintenance and support. So that is our Ray. Get yourself a Ray. So we're here today really to share with you what we have found to be beneficial for us and what has worked. Every company is a little bit different. Every company does things differently, and that's completely okay. We just wanted to share with you what we have found that's worked well for us, to see if it could be beneficial for you as well. Questions before we go on? Okay. With that, we're going to go into initial import, which Ray is going to take us on.
All right, thank you, Cassie. So as Cassie said, I'm the admin, so I've got a lot of, what I see weight on my shoulders, but I love it. I love HighSpot. She did mention our previous tool had a very negative connotation, and we have a 180-degree turn on that. Right? So one of the things that we looked at when we were first implementing or looking to implement HighSpot was the initial import of content. So I know a lot of you already have HighSpot, have already implemented it and imported a lot of content, but we really took a long, hard look at all of the content that we had in our previous tool and cleaned it up. We decided and made a conscious decision to say we need our content that is in HighSpot to be healthy, to be relevant, to be up to date. Right? So part of that strategy that we had on importing and initially adopting HighSpot was the content, and that's a big deal. Our sellers need and our reps need content that's going to help them facilitate conversations and drive business. And having up-to-date, relevant, pertinent content was a big deal for us, right? So we looked at, in the import, the content that's coming over, make sure that it's fresh. But then we also had to balance that with how are we going to create the infrastructure or the framework within HighSpot, to Cassie's point, to make it intuitive. Reps can find what they need when they're just kind of floating around in there. Right? So taking a look and really understanding what do we want to name the spots that we're going to develop in HighSpot. And then even beyond that, looking at the global lists, the lists that are shared across all the different spots, as well as individual or specific spot lists. Okay? You got to look at this from two lenses as well. You have to look at this from the lens of your publishers, who's going to be uploading that content, maintaining that content. But then are your users looking at that content and naming of the content in the same way? Right? It's a fine balance that we needed to get. Right? But we did start off with a strategy. We chose the spots, we chose the global lists, and we chose spot lists. Say, this is a good place to start. We knew we were only going to get a lot of positive feedback given where we were coming from, right? So this is an ongoing evaluation that you need to do. It's not a one and done. You don't just put it out there and never think about it again. But you should have someone or a group of people that are revisiting the structure, the framework. Do the lists work? Do you need new lists? Right? So this is something that we want to pass on to everybody that maybe has implemented HighSpot and hasn't really taken another good, hard, long look at how is it being used. And we're going to get into some of that in some of the other topics that we have during today's presentation on how to maintain the governance and then use the information that you're getting and the data that you're getting from HighSpot to make some really solid decisions moving forward. Any questions, comments on your initial import? Any great nuggets that maybe you folks have been already using HighSpot for a while can share with me, because I love them. Okay, well, see me after, okay? All right, so with that, along with creating the framework, we wanted to really kind of help everybody understand, especially those who are thinking about adopting HighSpot or just have adopted HighSpot, the importance of your publishers. So with our publishers, I do want to start off by saying, in our previous tool, we had hundreds of people that were allowed to publish content into our old tool. And that quickly became a content repository, not a content management tool. Couldn't find anything. There was content in there was 5 or 6 years old, and it would be the first up on a search list. It was not a good thing, right? So by having these conversations and doing multiple training sessions with our publishers, we ensure the integrity of the content. We make sure that it is fresh, it's relevant, doesn't get outdated, it keeps its life, it keeps its breath. Right? So we wanted to make sure, the best way to put this is, publishers, you guys are either going to make or break HighSpot and the use of HighSpot in our company. We need you guys to understand your importance and the value that you bring. And we wanted to make sure that they understood all of the standard processes, but then also let them know that they have a way to feedback on what they would like to see and how to make it easier for them to upload content and manage the content that they have to upload. We did let them know that we're going to be governing the content. I'm running reports and I'm having meetings with these guys on a monthly basis for spot policies. We did implement that functionality, right? We want to see certain tags or property contents need to be filled out. Right? Titles may work internally, but is that the title you want your customer to see on an external document that you pitch? And I think we've got a little story for that I'm going to hand it over to Cassie to explain a little bit more on that. So, Cassie?
Yes, yes. So if you don't utilize spot policies and policy violations today, I very highly recommend it. It is a fantastic way to keep tabs on things without having to physically have your eyes on everything. It's very practical to make sure the right things you have that governance and that control over without it being overwhelming. One thing that we had recently added to our spot rules is external title. We had a sales rep unknowingly send a piece of content out to a customer with the term prospecting in the title. Things like that where it doesn't seem like a big deal when you're uploading something as a publisher, but thinking about how fast people are moving, you have to make things as foolproof as possible. So then that way you're eliminating potential issues or room for error. So spot policies, policy violations, I highly recommend just because it is a really good chance to avoid things like that happening, but also to make sure that even if you have an admin like we have Ray and you have say hundreds of publishers, you can't have your eyes on every single thing. So it's a way to have those foolproof guards in place. All right. Next then we're going to go into knowing your audience. So when you think about a sales enablement or a sales engagement tool, naturally, you're going to think about how do we, as the team supporting it, think this should be structured? How do we think this should be managed? And you almost need to flip that on its head and not think about how we within sales ops, we within sales enablement are structured, but rather, how do your audience go and look for data? How do they go and look for content? How are they going to naturally go and do things? And you have to really cater your structure to them. It's more challenging for you, but the end result is far more positive. As we mentioned before, our prior tool that we utilized, the folder structure was structured how we within sales operations were structured, which we would think, hey, that makes sense, right? What we found, though, most of our sellers didn't even know what sales operations was or didn't know there was different teams. So having our folder structure in a way that fit us wasn't helpful to them. So as we took the approach to what should our company spots be, how should things be structured, we really had to look at it from the lens of how is our audience going to go and look for this and then cater our structure to that. It's definitely more challenging to do so, but the end result will be a lot more positive. And then also know how your audience is going to action things. So we've found most of our users, they search. And you have to, with that lens, be thinking about when they search, what are the first things that are going to pop up? What are we putting in the description? What are we putting in all of the metadata that makes sure when they're searching for X, Y is what comes up, which is what we want to surface for them. Go in and test it out. Go and search yourself. There's the digest we get monthly that shows what has been searched the most number of times and whatnot. Utilize that very strongly because you need to know how your audience is behaving and then make sure how they're behaving is giving them the results that they would expect. If not, then you need to do something different and reassess that. Ray, anything else you want to add to that?
Just to kind of reiterate that, that knowing your audience, it ties back to the publishers, right? That titling of content, how our reps are searching. We need to let the publishers understand this is how our users use the tool. This is how they find content. And to Cassie's point, the file names or the convention that each of the individual teams and groups use doesn't necessarily make sense for your sales teams or for the users of HighSpot. So helping them to understand that and adjust, right? As Cassie said, it's a little bit more work on our side. It takes an extra minute to 3 minutes, depending. But the end result is better adoption, better use, and ultimately we can drive profitability and drive sales in our organization and really present ourselves as trusted partners and value-creating partners with our customers because we're giving them good, relevant, thought-provoking content. But that all starts with how is that content getting uploaded? But knowing your audience and who's going to be consuming it and how they consume it is another aspect of when you're bringing in your content, when you're adopting HighSpot, as well as continue revisiting of this. I run search analytics on a monthly basis because I need to know what our reps are searching for and can they find it. And if they can't find it, I bring that up on our monthly meeting with our publishers to help them, again, bring that to the forefront of their mind. Because our publishers, that's not their full-time job just to publish content. They've got another job, another role. They're doing this as an additional responsibility. And depending on how often they do it, you tend to forget things, right? I'm sure at some point everybody in the room rode a bicycle or maybe a skateboard. Can you get on that bicycle and that skateboard today? I know I couldn't. It'd take me a little while to remember how to balance on those things. So it's a constant revisiting, right?
And one thing that Ray does a great job with as well is he has monthly publisher meetings. So his point about reminding them of things. At first, there was a lot of reiterating of the basics, but that strong foundation and knowledge of all publishers being on the same page is monumental. From you think about the lifelong. How we want to make HighSpot sustainable. You have to have those consistent foundational things that everybody is on the same page with, and it may take reminding them time and time again at first, but they will get there. And then that also, the monthly publisher meetings are also really helpful for, as we heard this morning, HighSpot is constantly coming out with additional capabilities, new functionality. That's a really good opportunity for us to make sure that our publishers are aware of that, because they're not going to be living and breathing HighSpot as much as we are. So they might not be knowledgeable on some of the new functionality that could be beneficial to them. So that's another tip that I would recommend, is having a monthly publisher meeting. If there's a month where you don't have anything, that's fine. You could cancel it, but you could also just have it be an opportunity to reiterate things that you're seeing that are working well, if you don't have anything new to cover with them. So we found that to be incredibly beneficial, and help really have a united front with all of our publishers. Because as he said, whether or not HighSpot is successful is very much dependent on those publishers.
Get their feedback too. Let them know that their voices can be heard, right? We don't want it just to be a check the box process for them. They have some input on this as well. And they do love some of the new features that HighSpot has come out with, some of the scorecards and things. Those are great. They love those. So, all right. So we've talked a little bit about the spots, importing the content, publishers, our audience. We also were very, very excited to learn how tightly HighSpot can integrate with the existing tools that we have, right? It integrates very nicely, very seamlessly with our tech stack. So we do use SFDC, Salesforce, as our CRM, and we are also utilizing an activity-based platform called SalesLoft, which is, I believe, a partner for HighSpot, so little plugs there. But we love the fact that all of the work that we do in HighSpot is easily integrated into SalesLoft. We can curate and bring up content in Salesforce at a contact, a lead, an account, an opportunity level, or even at different stages within opportunity. So this really gets us excited about what we can do to curate content, to bring it up right at the moment in time that that rep needs it to be able to pitch that content out. And this is really going to resonate with your sales teams. It's going to save them time. Right? Some of the templates and pitch styles within HighSpot saves them time from having to figure out, what do I need to write? What email do I need to put together? What copy do I need to put in there? What content do I need to associate with this at the discovery stage, or just trying to facilitate a new relationship or develop find a new contact, right? schedule a meeting with somebody, right? Even present different products, or in our case, our lines of business that we offer, right? So that saves them time. It allows them to quickly pitch content that's relevant, that's going to pique the interest of our customers to want to have that conversation with our account managers, and ultimately get them focused on what they're getting paid to do, which is have those conversations and sell, right? They save time on trying to develop content and throw that content out there. They can spend their time on actually selling, right? So definitely utilize the integration that it has, especially if you use Salesforce. I know it integrates with other CRMs. I can only speak to Salesforce because that's what we use, but we love it, and we're continuing to look at how can we even improve what we're bringing up in Salesforce, again, to make it super easy, super quick for our sales teams to pitch content out and start having those conversations, uncover different opportunities and deals, and reduce those deal cycles as well. And with that, I think ultimately it gets down to making some really good decisions, and that's done with the data analytics reporting. So I'm going to let Cassie go ahead and speak to our data-driven decisions.
Awesome. Thanks, Ray. One thing I would highly recommend, speaking about alignment with your tech stack, is monthly go in and reassess what you have served up when within your CRM. If you have HighSpot content serving up at certain points in your pipeline or different things, just go in and look at that monthly, because if you do it once, 6 months later, it's not going to be relevant anymore. So you have to make sure that you are constantly ensuring what's being served up to them when is still current and relevant. It doesn't need to be some, earth-shattering thing that you spend hours and hours doing every single month. Spend 30 minutes, go and look at it, go and see what content is being utilized and leading to success, and make sure that that is being served up to your reps at the appropriate time. The more you can do things in bite-sized, palatable ways, the more likely you are to make sure that your instance is current and relevant. It doesn't need to be this big, scary, overwhelming thing. Just do little bits and pieces here, monthly, weekly, whatever makes the most sense for you, and it will serve you really, really well. On the same thread, data-driven decisions. So I'm a data junkie. My team knows this. I love data. Data can be incredibly scary and overwhelming, but it can also be really insightful and really helpful. One thing that I personally love about HighSpot is the scorecards, reports. They are so impactful to give that insight to then drive action. It's not just a data dump of a whole bunch of stuff and you're like, what the heck do I do with this? They're really smart and intentional about serving up certain things at the right time. One thing that I know personally I utilize a ton is in the Spot scorecard, the governance scorecard. So I have the blessing of being responsible for 5 different teams, which all do very different things. And I love working with all of them. They're very different hats I have to wear. So time is not something that I have a ton of, but I'm able to manage a Spot. And I utilize the governance scorecard very regularly to stay on top of things. You don't have to have people who have all the time in the world to be able to maintain your instance of HighSpot. You just need to have clear ownership of who's responsible for what, and then ensure that they have the tools to be successful to do so. So I mentioned the governance scorecard I use a ton. Specifically the unused content, incredibly insightful. That tells you, hey, this content hasn't been used. You should probably take a look at it. That was something super helpful for me. We had some website releases from 2 or 3 years ago that, hey, does that even need to be in there anymore? Probably not. So we could right from there in bulk archive. Took me 3 minutes to archive a bunch of stuff that was no longer relevant. And then the violates policy, I mentioned before how important spot policies are and looking at policy violations. Right here, I can quickly and easily see these things need to be addressed. Go in and do them in bulk. All very quick and easy ways to make sure that what I'm responsible for managing within the Spot is current and relevant and up to date. If I had to do that on my own, it probably wouldn't happen. So that's where I mentioned how the scorecards they have and the reports that they have, utilize them. Don't let the data be overwhelming to you, because they will serve up exactly what you need to see and give you guidance on what you need to do with it. So does anyone here utilize the governance scorecard? I believe it's in beta right now, but anyone here use governance scorecards? Awesome. If you don't yet, 100% do it. It will save you so much time and energy. And then there's a number of other reports as well. Some of them that we use are content usage, content engagement, pitch engagement, pitch lists, and then publisher activity and content manager. There's some really good reports within there. Like I said, don't let it be overwhelming to you. Really think about what you're trying to get out of the reporting and then utilize it. It can take you 10, 15 minutes to go in, play around, but it'll lead to action, which is what reporting really should do. Anything else you want to add to that, Ray?
Just a little bit. So one thing that I just recently did was I made sure all of our publishers actually were part of our analyst group, so that I went in and I did spend a lot of time in the reporting and the analytics side, and I'm a data junkie as well. Right? I put together reports for my publishers and actually labeled them very clearly so that they can go in and see a list of content where they are listed as the feedback owner, and they can see which ones violate policy, which ones don't have feedback owners, and it's easy for them to go in and revisit content that they've uploaded to see, are the titles relevant? Are the external titles relevant, right? Making it easier for them to adhere to some of the policies and some of the recommended practices that we have at ODP. So putting those reports together and giving your publishers access to those is going to help them to do their job. And again, keep the content fresh, keep it up to date, keep it intuitive and useful for your reps. The other piece is that we did go ahead and set up the pipeline between HighSpot and our data warehouse, which pulls in everything from Salesforce and HighSpot and all the other tools that we use, so that we can start to create reports that we can give to our sales leaders to show this content helped to uncover opportunities, help to drive opportunities, help to increase the overall value of our deals or opportunities. And we did that, and then lo and behold, HighSpot came out with business outcomes, and we're starting to see that they're kind of connecting those dots for us. So as much as I hate to say I did a bunch of work I didn't need to do, it was still fun. But utilize the business outcomes as well as the new engagement tools within HighSpot. It's going to really be able to show what is the return on the investment, right? Marketing is putting time and money into creating content, right? Your product teams, your merchandising teams, sales ops, our sales enablement team, even our training teams, right? Everybody's got a lot of investment in this. Well, by setting up these reports and using the data, it helps to show the efforts and the results of those efforts from all of those teams and how you can move the needle and how this content can really help to drive sales. All right. So we've been talking for a little while about a few things, and we just wanted to bring up one last slide before we go into the Q&A to really make sure that these are the few takeaways, the things that as you walk out of this room, we want you to think about. Right? So number one is that initial import, and I even want to cross out initial and just say ongoing import. Right? It's something that you have to go back and really look at. Keep your data fresh, keep it relevant. Right? The second thing is as publishers. And again, I can't emphasize enough, as Cassie said, it's more than any one person can do, or if you're fortunate to have 2 or 3 admins, it's still a lot to try to govern all of the content across all of the spots that you might have. We're lucky in that right now we've only got about 6,000 individual pieces of content in our tool, but we're only been using it for about 5 months now. Right? For those of you who've been using it for 3, 4, 5 years, you probably have tens of thousands of pieces of content. Right? That's a lot to manage. So making sure that your publishers are active in keeping that content updated, keeping it relevant, removing stuff out of there that's not relevant can really just help to the overall management of the platform. Knowing your audience, again, it's important to understand. And also that is an evolution, right? We came up with an idea of how we wanted these spots labeled and tagged and the properties and how it was going to be used. And now that we've got about 5 or 6 months under our belt and we're getting feedback from our users, we're seeing that we need to make some tweaks. We need to make some enhancements and changes that, again, make it intuitive, right? That horse can just put their head up and smell the water and walk right to it and they can drink as much as they want. But you got to get that from feedback. You have to have that feedback loop. You have to have the collaboration between marketing, your publishing teams, your sales teams, everybody that's using it, and they can come up with some really great ideas. We've had some really great feedback and suggestions from our teams, from our sales teams, as well as our publishers, and even some of our spot owners. Right? And of course, the tech stack and the data alignment, that's really just going to benefit the entire organization. Right? If you can get all your tools working together, it's seamless, it's more efficient. Right? You can use the data that you're getting to really show the ROI. And in a lot of cases, that's really, really tough thing to do. To show all this effort, all this time, all this energy, all this resources that we have, what are we getting out of it? What's our return? If you have this integration with your tools and you have the reporting to show, you're going to be able to continue to drive sales. And you're going to be able to show to executive leaders, to sales leaders, and even to the reps themselves. This is the benefit that you get in your role with HighSpot and the content and the pitches and the pitch styles and the microsites and just everything. I mean, I get excited about it because I love HighSpot and I love all the potential capabilities that it has. We're being very diligent about how we're rolling it out. We're not just pushing everything out there. But when we push out a new feature, when we're pushing out templates, the pitch styles, we want as close to 100% adoption as we can get. So we're doing it very, very meticulously. So it might be a little bit slower to get to maybe some of where you all have gotten, but when we get there, our entire user community is going to be on board, and they're going to just chomp at the bit for the next feature that HighSpot has to release. So again, I'll kind of try to calm down and get the smile off of my face, but we do want to save a few minutes here at the end for any questions.
So you guys talked about feedback, and how often do you get that feedback from your key internal customers, so your sales, your account managers? Do you guys do surveys? Like, how do you kind of go about doing that? Do you just utilize the feedback functionality within the platform, or is it kind of a combination between all of those things?
It's a little bit of a combination of everything. We are kind of re-socializing this send feedback capabilities so that if it has to do with a piece of content, the person who needs to get that feedback is that content owner. Right? We do have a HighSpot at ODP Business inbox, and I manage that inbox. So we get questions, we get comments, we get feedback that way. And just because I have been in a training team and I've supported a lot of our sales teams, they'll just ping me directly as well. And of course, I have to kind of say, hey, can you send that to HighSpot at OfficeDepot.com? Let's get that in so we can get a list, because we still need to prioritize all of these suggestions, recommendations, and requests. But that's how we really do it right now. And we are definitely making a push to utilize the rating and reviews capabilities, right? And we want to make sure that our users know that that's going to benefit them, because as they're searching, if they're rating and providing reviews, it bubbles up higher in the search results. So they're more likely to find what they're looking for, even if that title doesn't quite match their search terms, right? So we're trying to get this balance, but that's how we get our feedback now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, right up here in front.
Hi, thank you. It's Michael from company Siemens. Congratulations on your first 6 months. It's the most exciting. I've got two questions. They're not related to each other. You said you have about 6,000 pieces of content. And one of the keys of everything is searchability. And one of the keys is how quickly can you find that one single document which is totally relevant to what you're looking for. Do you actually have a target, or do you measure that, or do you actually ask for feedback how quickly people can find stuff versus what they used to be able to search for? So in the good old days of bad governance, it used to take you so many hours, so many days, so many weeks to find something, and now it takes you so many seconds, so many minutes. Do you have actually, have you looked at that or measured that?
I can answer that. We did prior to coming in. Now that we're nearing the 6-month mark, we are going to do a follow-up on that. But we have some baseline data to say here's how long it had taken them previously, or I think we had done it as percentages of how much percentage of the time are they able to find what they need. So next we are doing the follow-up on it. But the baseline was poor, so I do think we're going to have some strong
How
improvements.
poor is poor, if you can answer that?
Oh
You don't
goodness.
have to worry about it. Ours was poor as well.
So I maybe can answer this because when I first started at Office Depot, I was part of the inside sales organization account manager. And I went into our old tool, trying to keep it clean here. I went into our old tool and tried to find content. And of the probably at least a couple of dozen times that I tried searching, I might have found the content I was looking for or relevant content 2 or 3 times. The rest of the time, it was asking someone else on my team, and they already had the document stored on their laptop, and they would just email it to me. So it went from literally, I got fed up and stopped searching, or it would take me days, down to what we're seeing is reps can actually find that within minutes. 5 to 7 minutes, I've heard from a couple of our reps that they're finding the content they're looking for. But also balance that with, we've only got 6,000 pieces of content, right? There's not a lot out there, and we're being very diligent on uploading new content. Next year, we may have 10 or 15 or 20,000 pieces of content. It may take a little bit longer, but we have the forethought and the foresight to say, what are we going to do to mitigate that and minimize that?
Okay, I'm still surprised at minutes, but okay. The second question, totally diverse from the first, was that you said that when you get questions coming in into your email at Help Me, you then send them straight through to HighSpot sometimes. Do you really do that, or do you actually filter it yourself and then only talk to HighSpot yourself? Or do you really let your own customer talk to HighSpot directly?
Okay, I'm sorry, I maybe didn't make it clear. We've created an inbox at Office Depot with just the email address of highspot@officedepot.com. That comes in, I'm managing that inbox. I then look through that content. I will keep a list of requests for enhancements. But if something comes through and one of our reps is challenged with some sort of functionality or process within the tool, and I can't figure out what's going on, I lean on Jess and Kelsey, who are our
But you answer the question back to your
Yes.
customer.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Yep.
Great
We
questions.
wouldn't put them through that.
Really good to see you guys have a clear vision for your high spot. We've been on it for about a year on the media owner side, and unfortunately it's gone really horribly. I'm wondering where you guys think high spot should be living in terms of organization. I sit in product marketing, and under my product marketing, I have in sales enablement, content enablement, training. I'm just trying to figure out where is the best place for it. And you're in analytics, you're in enablement. How do you guys decide, and who owns what part of it, and how do you guys collaborate? Because that's one of the things we're missing.
Sure. So I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but my thought, I think you need to have clear ownership of who's responsible for what components. So as you mentioned, I own a spot myself. I manage a spot for our supporting departments, which I have to work with a lot of our partner groups that aren't necessarily under my control. But it allows me an opportunity to be the conduit to make sure that the content within there for these groups is current, relevant, accurate. We have ownership of HighSpot live within sales enablement. The tool itself, ownership is within our group, but it's not us alone. This is where it has to be a strong partnership with marketing, which is something that frankly has been a struggle for us in the past as an organization. We recently have split into 4 separate business units and have a specific marketing team for our business unit now. So I think we have a lot better alignment between sales enablement and marketing. But it's not something that can be one and done. You constantly have to be working at it, have regular cadences in place. It may seem somewhat monotonous, but that's okay if it's maintaining a positive instance of HighSpot. If you're not having that recurring correspondence and dialogue, it can go sideways really quickly, which I think is what we saw happen with our last tool. And once you get to a point where it's gone sour, you can either really dig in and clean up and do it right, or you can consider another option, which is what we did, primarily just because the other tool, the perception was so negative by then. We could have made it perfect, and the perception would not have changed. So I would say it can't just be one team there's too much with it. But you do need to have clear understanding of who owns what components or what aspects to the tool. So Ray is the admin of the tool. He owns the tool itself, but he heavily relies on our publisher group for a lot of the content. But then he, herds the cats per se by having those monthly publisher meetings, having that clarity and understanding of, and outlining as a publisher, these are expectations of you. That's one thing we created right off the bat was publisher guidelines of this is what's expected. So when you are considered a publisher, that means you are doing these things. You may think it's intuitive and people should know, but they're busy. They've got things going on. By having it written out and agreement and understanding of these are the expectations, that way there's no possibility of them thinking they're doing what they're supposed to and not realizing that they're missing the mark.
Yeah, and I just want to reinforce it is, I am in the sales ops team. I am part of our sales enablement team, which is a huge group of 2 people. So we own the tool, but to Cassie's point, I make it a point to reach out to leaders. Each of the leaders, like in marketing, they own the marketing spot. The product team owns the product spot. Right? So I've made very strong and very quick relationships with them to understand that this is my role as the admin, and this is what I'm going to do. I want to do it with the carrot. I don't want to do it with the stick, but I've got my stick handy. Do I have your backing to do this? So it facilitates that partnership, right? And to another point Cassie made, it has helped us to be more of a collaborative group, right? We are setting up monthly meetings with marketing, product teams, merchandising teams, and our sales leaders to have these conversations to understand what content do you need? Marketing says you need this. Merchandising says you need this. Sales says you need this. Well, somewhere in all of that is what you're going to really need to drive business. So it is a group effort, and it's an effort, and everybody in the different departments that upload content has to have some level of responsibility to maintain that content. Okay? There's one more
Great.
question over here.
We are going to take a virtual question first, and then we'll come back to you over there.
Awesome.
Thank you. So we have a question from Nick McGreevy from our virtual audience. He asks, do you implement any search optimization best practices besides titling and metadata, perhaps within the content itself?
So at this point, no, we do not. We're really heavily relying on the title and the description to add maybe additional keywords or terms. That's how we're looking at it right now. Again, we're still infants in the adoption of HighSpot. So as we use the tool, as we get more feedback, as we get more data and understanding of the tool and the use of the tool, we start implementing sales plays, and we're using it for training and coaching and all these different aspects. We will revisit this and we'll see, is there a different way to do it? Is there a better way to do it? Is there a submission for a new feature that we can give to HighSpot for them to work on to help us out with that? But right now it is just title and description and the lists that are each of the pieces of content are tagged with.
We didn't utilize description as much at first, but we found that has been successful and helpful. So if you don't utilize description heavily today, it does help with the search results. Or if you see somebody is searching certain terminology and they should be getting a certain result, make sure that in the description you add a little sentence of something that mentions the specific terms that they're searching for.
So for the spots that fall within like your purview or responsibilities, how many publishers do you have, and how do you because I think I probably have about 35 publishers in my areas. So how are you managing like bringing them on and saying you have to follow these rules, right? And then how do you hold them accountable? We're using the spot rules, like if you're not filling out this metadata, your stuff's not getting published. But from a publisher perspective, how do you manage those people? How do you give them access? How do you determine who should be a publisher and who shouldn't?
I'll start and then I'll let you go into it because you live and breathe this every day. But I would say if you haven't yet, have a kind of come to Jesus talk around these are these are the expectations. Have the expectations documented too. Have this is the guide for what being a publisher means. That was something we didn't have in our last tool, and I think our past admin for it was a very kind person, and she a lot of times would just help people out and do things for them without forcing them to do it themselves and understand what's expected. And that then got her into a little bit of a pickle because then they were dependent on her to do everything instead of having that solid understanding of these are the expectations. If you are going to have publisher access, you need to do these things. Otherwise, we're going to remove your access.
This close, but no, not yet.
But I also think it's a matter of staying on top of it, utilizing the spot policies and reviewing the policy violations. If you're seeing, hey, this person is constantly doing things without having the appropriate information in there, just send them a quick note. They may not know they're doing it, and if they do know they're doing it, then they need a slap on the wrist and then possibly to have their access changed. But I think it's the understanding in the front end, but then the follow-up and accountability on the back end to monitor it to make sure that they are doing what's expected. Because if you're telling them, hey, you have to do these things, but then you're not holding them accountable for it, they're going to get by with doing as minimal as possible. Ray, I'll let you add to that because you live it all day.
Yeah, I'm helping to manage that. I actually set up a report for policy violations, or any of the fields that were not filled out. And I run that report and save that report on a monthly basis. And I actually get a month over month kind of view. And I did see one of our publishers' name came up in the top 5 almost 3 months in a row. He was number 6 on one of the third months. But I reached out to him and said, hey, you're not filling in these fields. It's important you do this. You're the make or break for this tool. I want to bring this up to you, remind you have to do it. You have to follow these policies. You have to put it in there. The second month I saw him come up, which he was at number 6, so I came in a little bit lighter and said, hey, you're still not doing this consistently. If you don't do it, I'm authorized to remove your publisher rights. And I know you're the one person that publishes literally hundreds of pieces of content over the course of a month. How is our organization going to feel if they have to replace you with somebody else? And I think that turned the light on his head, like, oh, wow, I can't lose this. This is a big part of the job that I do, because he works very closely with our merchandising, our partners, to create and put up the marketing content and the flyers and sell sheets and brochures. So that was something to help out, is that month over month trend of who is violating policy, how many pieces of content, and then just having a heart to heart with them and let them know, you need to do this. It's important and it's relevant. And if you don't do it, well, maybe you should find somebody that's going to do it so I can train them so they can do your job.
And I think it's helpful to help them understand why too, because a lot of the things that we have in spot policies is to ensure it's for a reason, right? So if they understand why, hey, if you're not filling this out, they're not going to find your content. It behooves them to fill it out, because otherwise they're wasting their time putting content together that nobody's going to use. So, like in many things, them understanding the why is really important.
Another thing to consider is some sort of recognition or kudos, right? So those reports. Yeah, exactly. Be nice every once in a while, right? Halloween at least comes around once a month, or once a year. You get free candy once a year, right? But get your publishers and let them know, hey, I see these are our top publishers. They're having the most activity on a month-to-month basis. And of these publishers, here are the top 1, 2, or 3 people that don't ever violate policy or have minimal policy violations, and give them some sort of recognition, whether it's a virtual recognition or it's a gift card of some sort, a little certificate that you print out they can put up on their wall, right? Just something to let them know, we recognize the work you're doing and you're doing a great job. Keep it up. That goes a long way with a lot of people. I know for me, somebody coming by and just tapping me on the shoulder and saying, hey, attaboy, Ray, that means a lot more to me than a promotion. Maybe not so much a raise, but it's right up there, right? Just getting recognized for the efforts and the work that you do is a big deal.
To add to that too, from a recognition perspective, different lens, but I want to give a shout out to Jeannie Cook, who's on our communications team, because she does something that we call our A team, where she assesses, okay, who's utilizing the content that's been given to them from emails, content, whatnot, and is utilizing it the most, but also is in the top attainment percentage, to say, hey, these people are using the content that's provided to them, the resources provided to them, and they're seeing success from it. So she does something when we call our A team to highlight, and she does it by director teams. So it's not just one individual person, but something where that sales director is then having a culture of utilize the resources available to you and it will lead to success, and then highlighting that. And we see there's 1 or 2 teams that are constantly up there. They're utilizing all the resources available to them, and it shows in their results because they're being successful. So just an idea. So shout out to Jeannie for that great idea.
Hi, this is James. Just to add to some scale to what you guys are working with, can you share your license counts and like how many people are spot owners, publishers, number of spots that are official, just other kind of metrics?
Yes, so we have a little over 1,600 active users. We have 8 official company spots. We have a total of 100 publishers, or people have publishing rights, but we consistently see active publishers in the 30 to 40 count range on a month-to-month basis.
Okay. And with 6,000 pieces of content, that's 1,000 a spot?
Yeah, if you were to average it out, but there's one spot that we have that is huge. It probably takes about 30 to 40% of that content that's in that one spot. The bulk of our spots probably have anywhere between 300 to 400 individual pieces of content at this point. Yeah.
Okay. And in your switch from your previous solution, did you find that having less spots was easier to manage? I don't know how the other solution was bucketed, but
Yeah,
It was a folder structure, and it was more, you had to like dig, where the spot functionality is a lot more natural to find what you're looking for, and you can gravitate towards certain things. We did have, I think it was like 13,000 pieces of content in our last tool, and a lot of it was unused. So when we made the transition, as he was talking about initial import, we eliminated a lot of noise. If you're finding where you have a lot of content in there and you're seeing a lot of it's unused, don't be afraid to pull it out or archive it, because it's better to have less if it's helping them find what they're looking for. And by archiving, you don't get rid of something, you just don't show it to them. But it's a good opportunity to eliminate that noise. But still, if somebody asks for it, you can obviously then restore it for them. So,
cool. Thank you.
I am. We have a couple of others with admin. They're listed as admins, but I'm the only active admin for a spot, yes.
And that question, just for those attending virtually, was, Ray, are you the only admin?
Good job. Thank you. That's right.
Any other questions?
Okay, yeah. Well, it sounds like no, but are you using the content approval process, or like have you considered using that?
We've definitely considered it, but we are getting adoption and alignment with our publishers, and I have threatened, I'm air quoting up here for everybody, but we have threatened to implement that with our publishers if they don't align with the processes and the guidelines that we've laid out. And we're seeing that they're adopting it and they're using those guidelines on a really consistent basis. But I just had a meeting with them on yesterday, and I did say that. I said, hey, we have to look at our external titles. We have to make sure that they resonate with our customers. And if this isn't happening, we will implement content approval, and reps won't be able to find your content until it gets approved. That could add an extra day or two or however long to getting that content visible. And at the speed that business moves now and the changing landscape for business, a day is like a lifetime for a rep, especially when they need a new piece of content or they need it rebranded or co-branded for different groups that we work with. So, yeah.
I have another question. With that many publishers, how do you balance people that are like, my content is most important and needs to be at the top of the Smart page?
So Haven't had a whole lot of that yet, but I think it was because we did already start creating what we're calling main pages, which was the terminology that we used in our old tool. So we are creating and have already have 15 main pages. So the publishers see that, oh, my content that I'm putting up there has a main page and it's being highlighted. So they don't push down that path right now. And we still have many, many more main pages that have been requested, and we're going to roll them out in a very concise, systematic way. We don't just want to dump everything out there. So yeah, don't have to worry about it right now. Everybody's been doing pretty good. So.
A little bit like tactically speaking with the main pages, I think I work with Stephanie, and something we're running into is that we want our marketing team to be able to publish, and we've started experimenting with approval policies, but we've put a lot of effort into the design of all of these overview pages, trying to refresh our entire instance. And I think because they have many other things that they're responsible for, there is not a real willingness to learn the system, and so they publish it. And then, so I think like with these main pages, who is responsible? So if someone publishes something, is it on the publisher to kind of move it, categorize it, tag it appropriately, or is that the spot owner, or is that you as the administrator?
So that is the responsibility of the owner of that page. So we have overview pages for spots, but these are separate from that. These are main pages that will focus on some of our account managers actually manage group purchasing organizations, right? So whatever that GPO, that group purchasing organization happens to be, I put a template together, give it to that program manager, all of them are publishers, and say, hey, let's build this out. Let me give you some tips. Let me give you some suggestions. They're responsible for managing the content on that page.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we are going to go ahead and close it out now. Thank you to Cassie and to Ray. This was amazing. I'm sure they'll be around if there's anyone that has any other additional questions, but big round of applause. And I think there's just a few housekeeping notes here. Make sure you rate the session if this QR code works. I've heard some feedback that for some, they're having some issues with it. So if you're able to scan the QR code and submit feedback on the session, that would be really helpful for us to continue to optimize breakout sessions like this in the future. Again, thanks to the sponsors. Without our sponsors, this would not be possible. So big thanks to all of them. And finally, if you haven't yet made your $5 donation in the form of that token that you received, make sure to go ahead and do that in the cylinders behind the reception area. We're doing that in lieu of swag this year. So make sure you choose a charity that speaks to you. Thanks so much for joining.